Hello, everybody. My name is Andy Engenutkan, and today we are going to have a wonderful session about Slack. So we are going to show you solutions on Slack. While we wait on a few people to join, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Andy Engenutkan. I'm a Salesforce MVP. I'm the founder of BRD Pro Consulting, Salesforce Break, and Flow Canvas Academy. And I teach flows. I spend most of my time building flows, and I'll also do sessions like this, to highlight individuals in the ecosystem actually doing great work, wonderful work in the ecosystem. So, sorry for the feedback right there, the sound feedback. I was just checking whether we are live. So it seems like we are live. So, having said all that, I'm going to start a new cohort of the Flow Canvas Academy Complete Flow course in January. So, if you are interested in learning flows in a live environment, it's a program that lasts 6 weeks. Go ahead and look up my profile. And on my profile, you are going to see the link to Flow Canvas Academy and you can inquire about it. Let me know. Just connect and ask questions. So throughout this session, you are able to enter your questions. We are live on both LinkedIn and YouTube. You can just type in your questions and we are going to try and answer all of them, right? So today, my valuable guest is here local in Jacksonville. We have been collaborating for quite some time now. Danny Sanchez is the leader of the Slack user group here in Jacksonville. He is a Gator, a civil engineer from University of Florida, long time ago, he says. Uh, and his background is in QA, in development, and he is now, I think, two-time founder, right? He founded a Slack agency, and then now he is starting another one, Ector Road Solutions. I believe he's going to tell you all
Yep.
about it. And the thing I love about Danny's approach to Slack, Salesforce, and everything I see that he does, we have collaborated on Salesforce Break before. He has a blog post up there. Is he likes to put things together to come up with efficient, fast solutions using Slack, Salesforce, or whatever else is out there. So he does. He's a builder. He puts things together. He does workflows, integrations, API connections. But I'm sure he's going to tell you all about that himself, and then he's going to also show you, right? So, without further ado, Danny, can you please introduce yourself a little bit further, maybe in detail, right?
Yeah, of course. So happy to be here. Thank you, Andy, for having me. So pretty long background there. I graduated in civil engineering, but I've spent most of my career working in software, product companies, engineering teams, consulting in Salesforce and Slack most recently. And so to your point, Andy, a lot of building, a lot of finding solutions to problems between systems and integrations. And really now as a lot of people are, heavy focused on AI. So the session today will talk a lot about Slack AI specifically, but long term looking at what solutions and problems we can solve with things like Agentforce and AI between Salesforce and Slack. So more to come on that.
That's great. Well, first of all, let me just tell you, it's a very interesting time, right? It seems like the whole big tech as an industry is kind of transitioning. It's in transition. It's going from what we've had, I would say like a more deterministic UI kind of infrastructure. We would just enter things into the system. Those things will get stored. We would build automations and then do things with it, right? Analyses. But we are going to a more AI driven, maybe conversation driven future, right? And when we're talking about that, like, what I mean by that is like now Salesforce has shown us pretty well, like at Dreamforce, at last Dreamforce, they are kind of envisioning. a future where the users will actually type or interact with voice with their CRM system rather than what we've been doing.
Yeah.
And what better way to do that by leveraging Slack. Like you could leverage Slack doing that. You could leverage Slack's power inside Salesforce to do that, right? So I think that future is probably very exciting for you. And within
Yep.
Slack now we had a Slack AI solution, right?
Mhm.
And we are gonna have Agentforce, Slack
Yep.
Agentforce, or we already have. So what?
Yep.
How do you see this whole development in the market?
Yeah, great question. I mean, that's something I'm looking at Actor Road Solutions, that's really what this company is looking to try to do and solve these problems for customers because there's a few different routes, right? You've hit on them. Slack AI is kind of the self-contained version of AI within Slack that was meant originally, and I'll talk on this in a second a little bit more, but really meant to be a quick way to have summaries and get information quickly in your system you're already using, which is Slack. And then you have Agentforce, which is again a very similar idea, but within Salesforce, all of your Salesforce data. Can I get that served up quickly? Can it answer questions quickly for me? And then there's probably a third bucket where Slack has recently, as part of agents and AI and this push at Dreamforce, released APIs where you can build agents. So you can even build full custom agents within Slack that have access to this side panel. And there's even some from applications. So Adobe Express is one that I tested, right? So in the sidebar, you can actually create images in seconds within Slack using this agent functionality. And so we're talking about a couple months have gone by since Dreamforce, and these are all very new things and technologies and figuring out how they fit. So I think the future is extremely bright in being able to create these solutions that don't automate work away, but provide you ways to do your work even more quickly than you were able to do before.
That's great. That's awesome. And so we've already had a workflow solution inside Slack, right? That has gone through a couple of iterations. We've had basic functionality at first, then they've built additional functionality, especially made it much more powerful, integrating with other solutions so that you can come up with like a better automation within your Slack environment, communicating with external systems. At some point, I think we've had the basic workflow functionality free on top of the license that people already had in Slack.
Mm.
But then a second tier like that leverage those integrations was, I think, price per consumption per use.
It
But
was.
then, but then I think that was not very popular, and they've actually included that already, right? So there is a
Yep.
lot that you can do now with this platform, and considering also Slack AI and Agent Force is coming on top of that. And I think you can inspire people today
Yep.
to do more with their Slack system.
Yeah, absolutely. Even on top of that, just one more thing to note there is that, right, there's all these building blocks, which we'll show in a second, right? There's the standard native Slack workflow steps that are included as part of Workflow Builder 2.0 that allow you to do more things. The original steps only allowed you to open a form or post a message, right? And those work very well for a lot of use cases, standardized information, support ticket. You can think of those kind of scenarios, right? The new Workflow Builder has maybe 20, 30, 40 different native steps from Slack. They have the custom steps, which integrate to third-party systems. There's probably over 60 or 70 different applications, each with their own steps. And then there's the ability to create custom steps hosted in Slack's infrastructure. So say you have a workflow where you need it triggered by a link. You have some steps that work, but then you don't have the exact building block you need, that Lego piece that does exactly either the logic or the integration you need. You can go create that in Python, deploy that to Slack's infrastructure, and create a workflow that, again, you've custom built and even have custom code within it. But for your admins, for your people who are using these workflows who maybe don't code, you're just creating that for them to use in their sidebar. And I can show you what that looks like here as well.
Yeah, and I bet many people who are using licensed Slack workspaces don't leverage that, right? So they may
Yeah,
not even know that it's there, but most probably these are the solutions that they can already use without even paying on top of what they've been paying to Slack, which is something beautiful that they could try and leverage. So yeah, would you like to walk us through the capabilities that you want to show us today?
Yeah, let's do it. I will share my screen.
All right, we
You
can see
guys,
it.
awesome. So I have a kind of two screens here. I have a quick intro again. This is just my information. Danny Sanchez, founder, Ector Road Solutions. Nice to meet anyone who's on or watching this down. Here's my contact information if you need it, but really diving right into what the features of Slack AI are, right? When Slack AI was first released, it was really meant to be a, maybe not meant to be, was initially released as a way to summarize conversations, right? That includes channels, threads, DMs. They've recently released the ability to summarize files. So you can actually, if someone puts a file into a channel, it'll summarize the information in that file into a few sentences, and you can see that. At Dreamforce, they also released huddle notes. So you can turn AI on in your huddles, it'll take notes for you. So we've seen a lot of investment in summarization of content across Slack. I know that they're working on, heard we can expect that they're working on summarization of probably things like lists or Canvas, right? Right now, those are things that you can't get those summaries on, but I'm sure that that is on the roadmap. Additional things that we've seen from Slack AI after these kind of initial things around summarizing these conversations, files, huddles, is search. So optimized search, having a conversation to your point, Andy, about more conversational interaction with your data, having a search that's not based on a term, but based on how can I, what is going on in this channel and being able to get relevant data kind of in a conversational mode. Now that is available with Slack AI as well. And then maybe the one that they've pushed a lot, you might have seen at Dreamforce, was recap, right? So you add recaps to your channels. Say there's 15 channels that have a lot of activity going on in them. You add Slack AI recap to those channels every morning when you come in at 9 a.m. It gives you a summarized version. So while originally in the first column here, right, you had to go in and manually click a button, you can still do that today to summarize a conversation in a channel. Recap automates that, makes your life again even easier. So even in the progression of Slack AI, you can see how they're thinking about automating things that maybe were originally manual to do, even with using AI. So you can see kind of the
Yeah,
progression. But the
and
the
I
last
like
one,
the.
yep, go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say I like the recap functionality. I'm in a couple of channels with Salesforce on their own Slack workspace, and I've been receiving recaps. It's actually quite nice, quite efficient. It does it doesn't it have like a little bit of a hyped up kind of language? It's sometimes it's actually more exciting than what's happening in the channel, the way it recaps. But
Yeah,
so
yeah,
some of the
it's good.
summaries it comes up with is just like it's good though. It's good though.
No, and yeah,
Yeah,
that's go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it's much better than what actually iPhone gave us. I get like iPhone summaries of my notifications, and it's usually like I have a smart home system. It's like your front door locked, unlocked, locked, unlocked, or something. Locked, unlocked, couple of times, or something like that. It's just
Oh yeah.
not a huge value add.
And that's exactly right. I mean, I have a Xfinity home system, and it's the same thing. It's like a person, you got a delivery, or someone was, and that's not super valuable. This recap gives you a summarized version of those activities, but then it also links to all those things so you can see the individual pieces of information that it builds the summaries off of. So I use that as well. I mean, I love the recap feature. I definitely love the Huddle AI feature, but what we're really here to talk about today is the workflow builder. And at the bottom of this page, I'll make sure that we share this, is the guide to Slack AI. So this is from Slack's help documentation. If you have to actually go onto this page, there's little to no information about the workflow builder AI capabilities. So there's a lot of coverage of these features kind of up to this point, but not a lot of coverage about the workflow builder piece. So maybe that's separate. But again, these are two things that come with Slack AI that maybe don't demo as well to people who aren't builders. So hopefully for the audience here, it will be more interesting. But maybe these are things where you can really optimize your productivity in two ways. And we'll show and build some stuff in a second. I have some use cases we can talk through here. But the first one is using AI to build workflows. So instead of to date, if you don't have Slack AI, you have to go into Workflow Builder. If you know Salesforce Flow, if you built a flow in any Zapier, Workato, any of these other things, there's a trigger, and then you have to add steps to it. Right? I know Workato is coming out with a similar idea of like an AI that builds workflows for you, but essentially Slack has built that same thing here. You put it in a conversational language. You say, I want a daily stand-up that's sent to this channel, that tags people in it. It'll create you a template of a workflow, and then you can go and edit it from there. So it takes all of that initial work off of your plate just by putting a sentence in, which saves time if you're building a lot of workflows. And I'll show that in a second. The second thing, and this is the one that the use cases are really focused around, is the Slack AI workflow step. So when we were at the, a few minutes ago talking about all of the steps that are available native to Slack and Workflow Builder, when you have Slack AI, the second or a step you get is summarizing public channels. So you can start to think about, okay, well, I can use that in Workflow Builder and I can connect it to all the other steps. I can start to save a lot of time in some of these things that maybe I was doing manually before, or maybe I wasn't even doing, and now we can start doing. And so those are what we'll talk about now.
That's great.
So the three use cases, these are business use cases. These are things that Salesforce has talked about or does talk about in a lot of scenarios. What I want to cover here at the beginning is it's hard to demo AI without lots of data and production data. So the demo, while we can go build stuff, demoing these is going to be hard. So what I really want to focus on for people who are listening in or watching this after is think about the concepts of how this might work for your company, how it might work for your business unit, how it might work for your team, and then work backwards from there. Just try to understand the concepts because the demo isn't going to be amazing. I don't have, weeks of data. I haven't been running these for weeks. So we have to just think through it, the value of each of these use cases. I want to start with the first one. Sales leaders need a summary of all active sales channels weekly. So this is something Salesforce was talking about at Dreamforce. If you haven't heard of it, Slack Sales Elevate is a way to connect Salesforce and Slack. You can create Salesforce channels that have all your information from Salesforce. Maybe you don't have that, right? That's an additional cost. Maybe you're just using Slack channels to talk about opportunities that your business is pursuing or leads. Well, as a sales leader, my options are, right, I can use recap, sure. Maybe I don't want to use recap. Maybe I need a better summary in a different format. So as a sales leader, how am I supposed to pay attention to 20 sales channels every week without going into them and reading about them? Let's assume they're not using recap. Let's assume they want it in a different format. So what I've seen or what I've built here and we can walk through is how do I create a scheduled workflow that takes a summary of all those channels, takes that, it uses AI, that step to summarize all those channels over a certain time frame, and then post that into a sales leader channel for their review every week. So you can think about it in the context of that could be before a meeting, right? Maybe there's a weekly sales meeting by the leadership that needs to happen. They get that information before the meeting, and then there's no excuse going into that meeting that they haven't reviewed the latest updates from that channel. So for a Slack first company, that could be really valuable. I'll pause
Yeah, I
there.
mean, I can see the value in that. I mean, for people like me who have a few gray hairs, they'll remember the hours we used to spend we've spent just summarizing things for executives, right? Like either periodically, you would have some kind of management meeting or like weekly reporting, and then people will spend almost a day sometimes preparing things for management to review, or they are going to go travel to the headquarters, and then before they travel you have to prepare a summary slide for them or something like a report for them, recap
Yep,
all those hours that could have been spent somewhere else, like if we had Slack.
exactly. No, that is a great segue into the second two scenarios because that's exactly what I think and see. My background is in consulting, in delivery management, working a lot of projects, right? If you're a delivery leader, you're probably or a portfolio director of a lot of projects, you're probably managing a lot of in-progress consulting projects, or even an internal team where you're managing multiple projects across multiple teams, right? So maybe you're not, this isn't a sales use case, this is a project management use case. So how am I supposed to get updates for all those channels or all those projects and then either put them into what the second scenario here is put them into a list. So, with Slack lists, you can create a list called project statuses, and that creates
Yeah.
a project status record weekly. And then you have, as time goes on, every week you have a record in your list that has the latest project status from that week. So from a historical perspective, right, maybe previously, to your point, Andy, there was someone on the team who was maybe a PM or a junior PM who's working with the PMs to meet with each PM for the projects, talk to them, figure out what the status update is, and then go in and create a record of a project status across all the projects for that week. Like just talking about that sounds like a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
And so what this scheduled workflow would do is, taking it on forward from the sales example is it is a scheduled workflow that summarizes all active project channels and then creates a new record in a list. And then within that list drops all that summarized information. And then all the project manager has to do at the project management meeting, right? Delivery leadership meeting, whatever that looks like. All they have to do is pull up that list item, and that has all of the summary information. They can use the thread in that list item to have a conversation about it, right? And then historically, as time goes on, you have a year of project statuses, all automated by, AI with the ability to actually go back historically and look at them. So a different use case from the channel. Now we're moving into list. And then the last one, because it is related to your point, Andy, about you said a deck or a presentation. Um, Maybe an executive doesn't need the list of all the project updates. Maybe they want it in a canvas. So this is something we've seen in sales use cases before, and I know that Slack has demoed maybe at, or Salesforce has demoed maybe at Dreamforce or other, like New York World Tour, is a weekly status into either a template canvas if you're on Enterprise Grid, but even if you're not in Enterprise Grid and what I'll show today, you can just create a brand new canvas with the summarized information, send that to a delivery leadership channel, an executive channel, and then they can have a canvas of all of the statuses of, either the projects or even individual projects. And again, so whichever format makes sense to your team, if your team wants a summarized version in the channel, because that makes more sense, that works. If you're using lists, it's a great way to have historical data in a single spreadsheet. And then if your team is more happy with, single pagers or one pagers, a canvas is probably a better use case. So a lot of different ways to slice and dice this.
And the list functionality, I guess, with the exception of Agentforce and the AI, is the latest development, right? Is the latest addition to the Slack kind of functionality, and people are doing exciting things with that. In the community Slack workspace, I follow what people are doing, and they are even talking about replacing some of their basic project management kind of tools with lists. This when
Oh,
we
yeah.
say lists, we're talking about actually quite interesting functionality that you can achieve with that. We're not really talking about like 10 lines of text, right?
Yep, that's right. Full fields, with field types. So it is not a replacement for a full Jira solution, of course, to your point, but for lightweight tracking of projects, it's definitely more than powerful enough. So unless there's any questions or anything so far, Andy, I'll jump right
All
into.
right, so we have one question. I don't know if
Okay.
you want to take it now or later. Is there an option to send the summary to a Salesforce record? Katya asks.
That is a great question, and actually, I think that is possible using a Salesforce step. So I will actually skip over into one of the demos just because this will be good for context. Katya, thank you for the question. So this workflow that I'm showing here, and I'll make this full screen.
And while you're pulling that up, Alvaro is asking, is there going to be some kind of demo or is it just going to be a PowerPoint slide? I mean, Alvaro, it's pretty much my personal brand not to do too many slides. Where everything we do is like living on the edge and doing live demos and tasting the possibility of Murphy's law of failing, right? So that's
It's
that's
gonna
what
fail.
that's what we do. Yeah, we're gonna do that.
It's gonna fail. Yeah. So going into building it. So let's say this weekly summary that we're sending into a channel, instead of into a channel, we want to put it into Salesforce, Katya, for your example. So what we see here on the right-hand side are all of the standard native Slack steps. So if you haven't seen this before, these are all native. The only one that is not native that you would need Slack AI, that's a different SKU, a different license for, is right? This step here. So summarize private channels. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So you have all these native steps, the Slack AI step, and then you have all these what they call platform connectors or third-party steps. So these are all, again, available depending on your Slack organization. Some of them may or may not be available. If you don't see them, work with your Slack admin. This is all of them. But what you could do is you could use a Salesforce step and you could update a record. So basically pull the summarized information from a channel or multiple channels, grab that information as a variable, and then use an update record step, which I don't have this connected to Salesforce, but use that step to then update a record in Salesforce. So it is possible.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you
Yep.
could even set up a custom object for this for your project, weekly project recaps or whatever, right?
Yep. Absolutely. And that's the same exact thought process of the list in Slack. It's really just where you want your data. Do you want it to live in Slack or do you want it to live in Salesforce?
Yeah.
Which, is confusing because they're one and one and the same. Uh, so let's look at the weekly summaries channel workflow here. So I only have a few channels here again, right? Think about it in terms of your workspace, your Slack instance. There's probably some leadership channels out there, either for delivery team, for sales, for whoever is responsible at the leadership or management level of whatever team it is, right? They need to get this information. So what this workflow does, if you're not familiar and you haven't built a workflow before, there's to start the workflow, you have to pick a trigger. In this case, for most of these scenarios, I want these to be scheduled workflows. So this one's going to start at a schedule. Right now it's set to run once. I'll move it to weekly. Let's do weekly on Mondays. Save that. Right, so it's going to start today. It's going to run every week on a Monday. And then what is it going to do? It's going to summarize the last 7 days of this opportunity channel. So I'll click on this one. And so right now, this is only summarizing one opportunity channel. If you have others, right, you would just update this to all the other opportunity channels that you have. And then you set your duration. I just want the last week. Again, you could do even shorter time frames. This component, actually want to pause here. This component is very basic to start, right? But if you start to think about where Slack might take this, then you start to think about, okay, well, right now it only summarizes public channels. What if you could summarize private channels? What if you could change the duration around? What if you could use a variable for duration instead of these hard-coded values? I think this is, again, speaking about the slides earlier, when you think about Slack AI's progression into where it is today, this is the kind of stuff that they say, like push for feedback. And that's what Slack always says whenever they say it to me all the time. I'm always talking to their team through support or sending feedback and saying, why can't I use a variable? And to your point, Andy, in the Slack community, you see a lot of good conversation about people pushing these types of components forward. And so here, right, you pick your public channels, you pick the duration, you save this. What you'll notice now is I have a step to send this summarized, summarization of the last 7 days of this channel into the sales lead channel. And this is where some of the power you'll see. So if you haven't used Slack before or Slack Workflow Builder before, each step you use, you can think about it in Salesforce flow context, has some kind of variables you can use that come out of it. In the case of the summarize public channel step from Slack AI, you get very few variables out of it other than the summary. So I'm going to get the summary. That's what I've placed here. And so here's a summary of the past week's highlight as summarized by AI from each channel noted below. This is just one channel example, but here's a summary. You publish this, and boom, you've set up a first workflow using Slack AI that basically summarizes any channel and then sends it to the sales leadership. And again, not a amazing example because there's not enough data to generate a summary, but this is what it would look like in that leadership channel for the members.
Yeah, and the data in the history actually makes AI shine, right? In pretty
Yep.
much all of the examples, it doesn't matter where you are, Salesforce or Slack. I was just playing with, for example, the um, case categorization with Einstein, and it's asking for a
Mhm.
minimum number of cases, obviously, to build the history on. It needs data to process all that.
Yep. So it can become difficult to show this stuff, but hopefully the the concept is here, and this will be good when we show the next two workflows we build, because this concept is the only components we will change really are the following steps below Slack AI, right? Because those steps are always going to be the same. We want to start on a schedule. We want it to summarize certain channels. Those have to be public. Again, at least right now, only public channels can be summarized. We have to give it a timeline. In the cases I was saying for use cases, weekly makes sense to me. I could also see it being monthly, but that's not available right now, right? If this was 30 days, it would be great if you could prompt a user and get a variable and they say how long they want something, right? But
Yeah.
none of that stuff is available right now. It is something that I think it will come if I had to guess. So,
This is great. This is great. I mean, this is a great start. And
yep,
well, let me just remind people, Slack has a great developer program, and that has been the focus lately to get the developers and the ecosystem, the community to develop things on the Slack platform, especially using the AI capabilities. So if you're interested, go ahead and pull up the website and register. There are a bunch of sessions also by the evangelist and the Slack team, and also from talented people in the ecosystem. And when I say developer, don't think of it as typing code if that's not your thing. As you can see, the workflow builder in Slack has come a long way, and it's very practical. It's very easy.
yep, yeah, absolutely. And that developer program is actually amazing because it gives you the opportunity to have two enterprise grid sandboxes, which gives you the ability to connect those two and then test things between them as well. So if you work with externals or do any Slack Connect um, work with external partners or vendors, it just again gives you more opportunity to test things, not just self-contained to one
Yes.
workspace, but along with other workspaces. So we talked about a summary going into a channel. Now let's talk about a weekly summary going into a list. So again, we've gone, let me go back to my list here. So say we have we have a weekly status updates list. This is not a great example. Again, the data is kind of poor here, but this is what you would see. This is what a list is. There's a main column, there's a date column. You can add all sorts of other field types. So if I wanted to say, I can't think of any, like who created by, I can add this. I'll just say it's me by default, right? So you can start to see how you can build a list or a table of data. So say again, in this use case, we want a weekly status automatically generated for a channel. We wanted to put it into this list and we want to mark the date that it was generated. So in a year from now, in a month from now, every weekly update in the channel will be in here and I can say, okay, what happened this week? I can just go check the date. I can read the summary, bada bing, bada boom. I save myself some time, right? I can know exactly what's going on that week. Um, so how would I build that? We would have the same exact trigger. Again, this is one, starts December 9th, repeats daily. I would just change it to weekly. Let's do again weekly on Mondays. I would go and summarize, in this case, the same opportunity channel. We could do the project channel, right? So say we want to summarize this project channel for the last 7 days. And then I want to add an item to a list. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this one to show you. And let's go into this right-hand bar. Let's go to the list. You'll see we have a lot of different options here. But what we really want to do is we want to make sure that summary lands into that list, into a new list item. I'm going to click that. I will find my weekly status updates list. Sorry, going back. Press the wrong button. I'll find my weekly status updates list. I don't want a form because my weekly, again, if we want, a lot of what happens to get information into a list is a form is popped up, a user enters information, and then it goes into a list. So you can think about that in feedback, support requests. There's a ton of billion different use cases for that. In this case, I want it automatically done. So weekly status list is selected. It's going to show you a screen like this where you can map values from your workflow into the fields. So for the name, I can update that to the summary, but right now I'm going to have that mapped to the summary from the previous step. I'm going to put the date as hard coded. This is an issue I talked to Slack support about. This date field should be able to pull a variable. So when this workflow runs, it fills that date automatically. This
Yeah.
is seemingly a limitation of this. Again, this, to your point, Andy, list And these steps are also very new. So this is something that I've passed feedback to Slack on, and then created by, I can actually hard code as myself as well. And now when I publish this, right, same idea. We have a workflow that we've set up, runs every week on Monday. We'll summarize the project channel and then create a record in this list. I can rename this as summary, right? The summary, the date created by, and then, right, again, hopefully saves you time from what you maybe previously were doing to summarize projects.
Yeah, a list is a kind of a table, right? In the end,
Yep.
a table of information that you set up. So we
Yep.
have a question here now. Katya is asking regarding licensing. Do we need to have Slack AI license per each user to be able to do something like this?
That is that is my understanding. To be able to run the workflow, you would need the Slack AI, but I don't since so say let's say I created this list as the lead or the admin. I created the list. I created the workflow. I have Slack AI licenses. Do the other people at the company need Slack AI? I want to say that the answer is no, because they're not interacting with this in any way. They're
Yeah,
not. They're
that's that's
all there's yeah.
that's how it is like on the Salesforce side. If you have one license, you could do things like that.
Yep.
I would check with the Slack account executive or like the team there. But one license could be enough here, I would imagine.
That sounds right to me as well. Yeah.
And then we have another question. Can AI help with Slack? No, with sales forecasting in Salesforce and Slack. Sales forecasting with Hmm. Um, I don't know. Do you have an opinion on that? I mean, I would say you could probably generate information from Slack going into Salesforce about your kind of current status of your opportunities, right? So
Hmm.
you can feed that machine there, but then
Yep.
inside Salesforce, you could do things to help with that process. I would imagine that would be the next step, a separate step.
Yeah. I'm gonna say yes without knowing exactly the solution. That's what you say, right? Yes, but we have a because you we the thought process is, and this is something I've heard working with customers, is basically you want to be able to forecast or change your opportunities based on whatever is happening in that Slack channel, right? That is the main thought process here. So if the conversation in the Slack channel is, they want to move to the next step, blah, 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 right? I don't need to go into Salesforce and manually change that status or change that forecast. Somehow Salesforce is going to know and is going to update that associated record because I had a conversation in Slack. Does that sound like that's the
Okay, I
ideal
mean
state?
that's the thing, and I guess there is a whole industry on the Salesforce side about sales forecasting. There are
Yep.
several different types, and there are also a bunch of app exchange solutions. It's a difficult topic, but
Yep.
I guess the this information could inform that process, I would imagine.
Yeah. And I've talked to people at the reason I have obviously consulting background, so I think delivery more so than I think sales, but I've been working with some owners of other consulting companies who are trying to figure out how to use Agentforce to do this from a delivery capacity. So think about a project channel that's having a conversation and they're like, well, these weren't, the requirements weren't there. This is an issue. This is a risk. You're having a conversation in a Slack channel about this in a thread, right? That information somehow automatically triggering something in Salesforce to turn that project yellow or red or change a status, right? Which then triggers a message into the channel to let them know that the status has been changed and there needs to be follow up with the executive sponsor because blah, 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 right? So these things that are all related and now obviously they own each other, so these things will continue to get easier. I think there is a way. I don't think it's there yet, but I think Agentforce might be the answer potentially, or one of these Slack AI custom solutions. Can you do it out of the box now with what I'm showing here? I want to say the answer is no, because you would have to, we can put data from Slack into Salesforce, right? Like we're showing, we can summarize information and contents, and we can put it into Salesforce into a field, into a record, but that's not going to change the value. That's not going to change the value inherently based on what the summary is that I can
Yeah,
think of right now.
yeah, probably we're not there yet. Yeah,
It's close though. I mean, that's what people are thinking. That's what they want. So it's a great
yeah,
question.
that's right. So
So
let me ask you something.
yep,
What can Slack AI do right now? You shared with us on
yeah.
the slide, I think, like so summarization, recap, and what else? Like, can I, as a user, can I ask questions to Slack AI and can get help with things?
Yeah, it's great, great example. I mean, I'm not the best search. Obviously, I search for words, so I'm not the best use case of this. But you can, see at the top this purple bar. So as soon as you get Slack AI, if you have the licenses, it'll start giving you these tool tips. So it'll ask you, right, phrase your question like this to get better responses. And this is something even in my life outside of Slack, when I go now to Google, I don't look up words. I look up questions, like phrased questions, or you use AI search engines as opposed to the historical search, which was more term based. So this shows that progression as well, and it is helpful. But the
That's great.
the one the one you mentioned that I want and the one that I haven't touched on now is basically to create a new workflow. This functionality is brand new and super powerful, especially for people who haven't used Workflow Builder before, who might just want something quick to, right? So something quick to create without having to go through starting a workflow, doing these steps. People are intimidated by this. I'm sure, Andy, you're familiar with people being intimidated by even configurable flow components and tools. So the goal with Slack AI within the Workflow Builder was to try to automate with AI a way to create workflows or at least have something to start with. So um, post a daily stand-up message to a channel. Let's see if the demo rules work. And this, okay, see, so that worked. So I gave it an easy one. So, right, maybe you've heard Slack and you know that daily stand-up is a great way for, like, again, this is one of the original use cases of Workflow Builder, a stand-up. Post a message, everyone responds in the thread, you get an update from the team before you go on a meeting, saves everyone time, that everyone's updates are documented already. And so AI just generated that. I just hit setup. It'll then actually take me into the screen. And all I have to do is edit this. I can say, okay, well, I want to edit it to I'll just send it to a test channel. I save that. I click finish up. In less than a minute, I've got a daily stand-up workflow configured. So this is a good way to while Slack does have templates available, which I'll show also here. So I can actually, in my automations, go to templates. And Slack's done a really good job of creating workflow builder templates. There's ones that are only internal, so like scheduled message, weekly check-in, these are internal. This weekly AI channel summary is a templated version of what I've shown already. They also have workflow templates that have third-party steps. So one I see, one you see a lot is like Google Sheets, right? So this template starts from a link, it collects info in a form, and then it actually puts it into a spreadsheet in Google. And I can actually just set this up, same idea as the AI route I just took. I just click setup, and right, it's going to give me this new fancy AI, new fancy UI, and three button clicks. I can't publish it because I didn't connect to Google, but 3 button clicks and someone is actually able to create a workflow that's integrated with Google Sheets and updates information, sends a message to a channel. So Slack is trying, to your point before about them uh, stepping back or removing the premium workflow costs. I think what they realize is they're releasing all of this amazing functionality, integrating with third-party systems, maybe trying to compete with the Workatos and Zapiers of the world, but then they're going to charge for it, and no one ended up going in this direction because it's hard to know how much usage you're going to get out of these until you start using them and you start expanding them and people start using them. So I think it was a disqualifying step, but now that they're free, I mean, I recommend that anyone I talk to go build a step with any system you're integrated with, go build a workflow and start to learn what works and how you can extend and increase your team's productivity, even just with these templates.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question nowadays. We have all these like consumption-based tools, but
Yep.
then if you're the budget holder, how are you going to plan for this, right? If you're the responsible person within the organization to kind of predict the cost, because everybody does some kind of budgeting, right? You have to know. How do you predict, and then how do you kind of even measure, like get good reporting on, what your usage is and how much you're going to be charged for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we have 15 minutes more. Any other questions? If not, I wanted to show the Canvas one from scratch, just to,
Yes, let's do it.
great. All right. So we've posted into a channel. We've posted into a list with records of weekly updates as list items. Now let's do, Slack calls this an executive brief, a quick Canvas summary of some kind of information. On Enterprise Grid, for anyone who's listening in or watching who has Enterprise Grid, you can create Canvas templates. So you can go and create a canvas that has basically variables in it. You can then run a workflow and fill those variables out with information from the workflow. If you're not on Enterprise Grid, which a lot of customers aren't, you can still do what I'm about to show you here using the available steps that are included in non-grid plans. So let's say we're doing this one on Fridays, 8 a.m. We'll do weeklies. And we need a weekly summary of that sales channel to the executives. So let's get our AI step in here. Let's do the opportunity channel. We'll summarize it for the last 7 days. If there were other ones, we could add them in. Let's just do that one. And now we want to create a canvas. So we'll do create a canvas. Um, if you're on Enterprise Grid, you can use a template and you can select custom. You can select canvases here from standard Slack templates, but you can't make custom ones. In this case, I would just create from scratch. Say executive summary for opportunities, active opportunities, something like this. I'll make myself the owner. And then here you actually have the ability to do all sorts of formatting, right? So I'll say, as an example, not create language, but go into my variables. I'll put the summary, the open and active opportunities, if I could spell, right? And I saved this. And now I've got a workflow that runs Fridays, summarizes information, and then creates a canvas. And then we'll want to share it with someone. So we'll send a message to a channel. We'll just send this to the sales leadership channel. Say find, actually, wait, let me go back. I'm sorry. We could do it two different ways. We can either share a canvas or we can send a message. I'll just do share. It's a little bit easier. It's designed to share directly to the channel, share
And
to
we
the
can
whole
also,
leadership.
can we also send it to a private channel?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's the latest uh, opportunity info. Finish up, publish this, and again, same idea. Couple of clicks here. We've created a workflow, runs weekly, creates a canvas, and then shares that to the leadership channel. I'm gonna go ahead. I can't run it because they run one of the annoying things about this is, as opposed to Salesforce Flow, you can't debug these in a way that you can trigger them like right
Yeah.
now. So to test this, if you were building this yourself, I would, change this to once, change this to today's date, and then it would have to be, right, it runs in 15-minute increments, which this meeting will be over in. So while you're building it, just keep these in mind. You would just want to schedule them once for the next 15 minutes, test it, see what it looks like. And then once you get it to work where you like it to work, publish it for the right date and time and right cadence or frequency.
And for the viewers who have not played with Canvas, Canvas is kind of like your online collaboration platform for documents, right? It's your Google Docs, your Notion, your Confluence, whatever, that kind of functionality.
That's right.
Or
Yeah.
Salesforce Quip.
Yep. Yeah, it would look very much like this. What did I call the canvas? Executive summary for active opportunities. It would look like this, and then it would have the text below it with the summary kind of inline here. And so you can start to see, okay, well, this is like a very basic example, but if I'm summarizing, right, I can put as many of those steps in that workflow as I want. So I could summarize multiple project channels. I could summarize multiple delivery channels. I can summarize multiple public channels. I mean, there's tons of opportunity here to do different interesting things based on what you're trying to solve and where you want that information to go. A great question at the start. Do I even want it in an external system? Do I want that summary on a record attached to another record, in Salesforce or in another system that's available? So one of the recommendations from um, people in the community all the time is, and I'm sure, Andy, a recommendation from you is flow a diagram, an actual diagram of what you're trying to do out, and then come in here and then try to build it after you've kind of thought through exactly what you want it to do. That'll be super helpful in building this and solving your problem.
Okay, we have another question. Maruti is asking, can we leverage NLP in Slack to improve communication quality, automate responses, and make conversations more productive?
You can, but that is going back to a point I said at the beginning. That is not something that is available through Slack AI's this like native Slack AI functionality. That would be something that you would build either with Agentforce and then connect it into Slack. Right, in Agentforce, you can connect into your own LLMs and other AI providers, or you would create a custom agent using Slack's agent and assistant API to basically expose what an agent looks like on your right-hand sidebar. If I can stop sharing for a second, I can actually share that in another Slack to show
And
you
have
what
you
that would
been
look like.
have you seen the Agentforce Slack implementation yet?
I have not. My understanding is it is in beta now and should be available sometime in 2025. But
Okay, well, if the Slack teams are watching this, if anybody watches this, we want access, please.
access. And, let me. I'm going to go ahead and share another screen just really quickly to show what it would look like. Can you see can you see Slack?
Yes.
Okay. So this what you would see in that custom solution or what you will see with Agentforce is this idea of a different agent experience. So this is a totally new experience within Slack itself. And you see this sidebar. So I actually went and built an agent in Agentforce and then tried to connect it to Slack. Sadly, realized I could not do it. Which is why I'm getting this error message here. But if you went and built your own LLM, your own AI in some system, and then you connected it using the APIs available from Slack, recently released around agents and assistants, you could use this new surface, is what Slack would call it, and then your team could come into this surface and then pull information using that AI. So it is possible. It's not out of the box with what Slack AI is.
Okay. Yeah, because the value of Agentforce or agents should be that they can take actions, right? As
Yep.
opposed to just plain AI,
Reading data.
the one
Yep.
that we've been using. You have actually done some of that. You're taking actions, you're creating lists and putting out Canvas uh, information. But
Yep.
once the Agentforce implementation comes in, it should be able to do much more.
Yeah, we'll have to do another session when that's available because that's going to be a very powerful functionality.
Yeah. And when we talk about Agentforce in Slack scope, I think when we talk about Agentforce in relation to Salesforce, we actually immediately think of external applications because that's how also the marketing language has been. The marketing communication has been lately. Although many people argue the first use should be internal, and then you
Mhm.
should empower your own users, and then possibly open that up to your customers after that. But when we talk about Agentforce in scope of Slack, we're talking about actually empowering users because we don't really do Slack implementations where we communicate with externals other than guest users, maybe, right? External linkages, whatever. But we're not really talking about like a public interface for a Slack workspace, right?
This is true. Yeah, no, it would be internal. It would always be internal. At least that's the thought as it is
Yeah.
now. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting thought. So we'll see how that will evolve. But we
Mhm.
know. Parker said, I'm going to decommission Chatter. I'm going to
Yeah,
link Salesforce and Slack much stronger. So they've been at it, they've been working at it. We'll see how that will evolve. I'm wondering myself.
exciting, exciting stuff.
Do you also go to community events, Danny? Or do you have anything planned for next year? Any
I
Dream-ins
do,
or
yeah. I
Trailblazer DX or Dreamforce or
definitely Dreamforce, can't miss that. Potentially some world tours, maybe DX. But really, quick plug for the Jacksonville community. I mean, we will be doing an Agentforce, potentially hybrid, definitely in-person session sometime in January, TBD date, but it's going to be really exciting. It's part of an Agentforce kind of global push of community groups to kind of have this content and a lot of interesting and cool stuff. And if you're in Jacksonville, a lot of good swag. So gotta gotta mention that as well.
yeah. Yeah, a lot going on in Jacksonville. In fact, we are getting together this evening, some of us. Salesforce is
Right.
also involved, our account executives. Elizabeth set up something with the local IT community here. That's going to be fun.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody who joined. And, if you're watching this from a recording, just how do people contact you if they still have questions? How do they reach out to you, Danny?
Yeah. Dan, LinkedIn is probably the easiest. If not, Danny at ectorroadsolutions.com is also great. And you can actually Slack connect me through there as well. So whatever works.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's great to hear. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you very much, Danny, for this wonderful demo.